Today on the Big Six in 60, Karl Anthony Towns has dominated early in the finals.
There's a part of me that doesn't even know how to comprehend it.
The Pistons look at players to add in the offseason.
Who would be your top five? Who are some players that if the Pistons took a chance on, if they took a swing on, you'd be like, okay, I get it.
And LSU lands a 5-star commit.
Coming off an official visit weekend in Baton Rouge.
This is the Big Six in 60, the 6 biggest national sports stories from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big Six in 60 starts now. Thank you for making the Big Six in 60 your first listen of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The biggest stage in world soccer is here. Let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get started now. Karl Anthony Towns has been huge in the finals as the Knicks head home with a 2-0 lead. Lee Escobedo joins XJ with Locked On Knicks to go inside the run and preview Game 3.
I'm in jubilation, man. I've only known poverty, brother. As I told you when you were a guest on KOT, I started becoming a fan in 2002. Right when Scott Layden was at his worst, and right before Isaiah Thomas made it even more hellish for us Knicks fans. So there's a part of me that doesn't even know how to comprehend it and admit that it's real, because disappointment has become part of the woven tapestry of my fandom. But it's also been really beautiful to be able to have some of the most joyous moments of my life with my dad, cheering and hugging and embracing. We're able to express emotions and have this kind of vibrant connection with each other that only comes from the Knicks winning. And that has been so rare in the last 20 years that now that I'm experiencing it twice, 3 times a week, 13 games straight, it's been like the most I've ever hugged my dad in my life. And to me, what more can you want?
Man, that's amazing to hear. What a start to the pod, because somewhat like Gavin and I on the show have been talking about our emotions and our various ways of kind of being maybe emotionally stagnant, and the Knicks being able to help alleviate that and bring out stuff in us that like we haven't felt in a long time. And it's been just incredible. And I'm sure all of our audience, tons of our audience, feel a lot of that stuff too. So I appreciate you sharing that. I wanted to spend some time talking to you particularly because obviously, the Knicks are in command of this series. I keep hearing from Knicks fans like it's over, it's a wrap, this and that. They're getting ready for the parade, which is totally valid. I get it because of just what the numbers say, the way the series has gone. But the players themselves, you listen to Hart, Towns, Bridges, Landry Shamet, literally everyone we are hearing from is saying it's 0-0. We got to be desperate. It's desperate times. I don't want to hear none of that. Those are all in the past. And I wanted to spend some time talking with you because I think that you have a brilliant tactical mind for the game. And I really want to better understand what the Spurs are going to bring in Game 3 and beyond, and how the Knicks can be prepared to counter it and bring that title home to New York. Because, short anecdote, knock on wood, obviously, as I tell this, but I'm a New York Yankees fan. In 1996, the Atlanta Braves went up 2-0 over the New York Yankees in the World Series. They literally won the first 2 games in the Bronx. They had a prime Tom Glavine coming to the mound in Game 3, who was like one of the greatest pitchers of the 90s. The Yankees got outscored 16-1 across the first 2 games. Were just getting smoked. And then the Yankees proceeded to win 4 games straight and take the World Series in 6 games. So, Lee, this is not panic or disbelief or any of that in the Knicks, but this is vigilance and matching the focus of the team from our end as analysts of the team and watching what's going on. We really need to just stay prepared and locked in on what's going to happen. So for me, I want to start off just asking broadly, throwing it in your court and saying, what's the one biggest thing we can expect from the Spurs as far as adjustments go heading into Game 3 to try to get back into the series?
Well, first, to your question about that intellectual agreement you have to have between your heart and your brain, it's a hard one to negotiate. But I've had this like discernment in my spirit where I just really feel like this is a year for us to win this chip, and I felt it from the very start of the season. I've had pushed that narrative throughout the KOT show all season. And, I've had my moments of doubt, like any faith, right? But with the size of a mustard seed, it's grown into MSG. And I've seen just what the Knicks have done on the road and at home. And I don't think there's any real adjustment but the Spurs can make tactical, aesthetic, intellectual, existential, that can affect the Knicks' momentum and their sheer will to win. As you mentioned, man, all of the clip bite, the sound bites at the end of games, the pressers, it's like one linear thought. They all have the same mission. They're all wearing black. They're all bidding up in each other, but not bidding up themselves. I think the perspective is really wise for this team, and it looks like Kobe Shaq in the early 2000s. It looks like the Duncan Spurs in the early 2010s. It looks like the Heatles, right? And it's looked like lately the OKC Thunder and Boston Celtics when they won their championship. So, like there's things that are working for the Spurs. I don't think any of them maximized, whether it's the trapping that they're doing that's been generating steals across the game, or the hard blitz and double teams that force Brunson to be more of a scorer instead of facilitator. I think if Brunson takes 25 shots and scores over 30, that's probably the best chance the Spurs have to win. And even then, it's probably not going to end up in a loss for San Antonio. And now Wemby's length has been disruptive. I mean, he's held them to a 105 offensive rating compared to 123. That's a good thing, but they still lost both games. Dylan Harper, there's been no answer for him on the Knicks end. I think he's kind of a jumbo version of Rod Strickland that's eventually going to be a superstar. And he's gotten them in some cross-matching situations with Brunson especially, where he's gotten beat, and that kickstarts their transition game. They're going to be at their best when they're pushing the pace and getting steals. That 14-0 run that got them back in the game was based on transition and, that hard trap and getting the ball out on the floor. But it still ended up in a loss because they have a generational talent, two future superstars in Harper and Wemby, and a third legitimate star in Castle, and a future, in my opinion, big take, Hall of Fame coach in Mitch Johnson. But all of it is in the future tense. It's not in the present tense. In the present tense, we have the superstars. We have the elite coach. We have the offensive hub. We have the better depth. We have the better starting five. We have the better defense. We have the most unstoppable offense, and we have the best player on the floor in Jalen Brunson. So again, the things I mentioned, there can be more of that, or the Knicks to have an off game. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's any one singular thing or a collective of things that can stop what this Knicks destiny is right now.
That is beautifully said. Absolutely. And I think that it all makes total sense. I definitely appreciate the perspective. Everything you mentioned are things that have definitely jumped off the page as far as what the Spurs have tried to do. And they're trying to do nearly everything they can think of. I do want to kind of nail down on a couple of things specifically. So one has been the Dylan Harper problem, I would call it, which the guy's ascendancy has been very swift and very sudden and very abrupt, in my opinion. Like, he started off the season being good. He's shown he has the ability to get to the basket. Now, at this point, there's basically, you can't stop him from getting to the basket. He just gets there and he scores efficiently. He's like RJ Barrett with better finishing ability and better craft. Like, it's like incredible to watch. I think that the Spurs are going to try to really be aggressive with picking on Jalen Brunson. I don't think that they've done that as much. They've seemed to try to get Wemby going mostly, and that's how they've won a lot in the past. I think that some of that tactical, strategic deployment from Mitch Johnson is going to be more like, let's go to our guards and let's try to like pick on Brunson some more. And then on top of it, on the other end, I love the point that you made where it's like their best hope basically from the Spurs end is make Brunson make shots, right? And I thought in game one, I was like, I had tweeted this out. I said, Brunson's going to have a 40 ball. And we'll see if it's enough, because that's probably going to be the game plan for the Spurs. And Brunson took enough shots to have a 40 ball, but just didn't make enough to get there. So is that just like a crazy situation where if you're the Spurs and you're a Spurs fan and you're like putting your fate of your series in the hands of giving Brunson or making Brunson beat you, knowing that he hasn't played well and that is very unlikely that he continues to not play well, or I wouldn't say he hasn't played well, but hasn't made enough shots that he would usually make. And now you're putting your season on the line of Brunson, go ahead and beat us.
The biggest stage in world soccer is here, and every match feels like it has the potential for a memorable moment. One goal can completely change the energy of a game, shift momentum, and alter the outcome in an instant. That's what makes tournament soccer so exciting from the opening whistle to the final kick. Now FanDuel is giving fans another reason to stay locked into every match with every goal pays. Bet on a match and get bonus bets for every goal scored in that match. More goals mean more bonus bets. All you have to do is turn on your token. That's what I love about these tournaments. You can turn on a match between teams you don't normally follow, and suddenly one goal changes everything. The tension builds so quickly that you're invested before you even realize it. And now you get to benefit from each goal scored. From the opening whistle to the final kick, let there be goals on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com now to get started. Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. LSU landed 5-star edge rusher KJ Green, giving Lane Kiffin another big recruiting win. Matt Moscona with Locked On LSU breaks it down.
Coming off an official visit weekend in Baton Rouge, 5-star edge rusher KJ Green has picked the LSU Tigers, becoming the 5th commitment for the class of 2027. This just 4 days after Jaden Bryant flipped from LSU to Miami. That happened on Wednesday. Now here on Sunday, LSU has replaced one 5-star edge with another. So we're going to spend this time today breaking down who KJ Green is, if you're not familiar, how and why this all transpired, and we'll take a look at the 2027 class. So thank you for being with us here. Let me first start with who KJ Green is. So he's out of Georgia, 6'3.5", 210 pounds. Depending on which service you look at, he is an elite level prospect in the Rivals industry ranking. So this is the composite that combines all of the rankings. He's the number 48 player in the country, regardless of position. Okay. He's out of Georgia. But if you look at the 24/7 rankings, 24/7 ranks KJ Green the number 8 prospect in the country, not the number 8 edge, the number 8 player overall, a top 10 player in the country. Now, to illustrate the wide variety of what different scouting services may think of these players, 24/7 has Green as the number 8 player. ESPN has Green as the number 45 player. And then Rivals has him as number 234. So Rivals is certainly not very high on KJ Green, but 24/7 ranks him a top 10 player in the country, regardless of position. So our buddy Shea Dixon from On3, earlier this week, when we learned that KJ Green was taking an official visit to LSU this weekend, gave us a few tidbits there on the edge rusher out of Georgia.
Green, if I'm not mistaken, he's a Stone Mountain boy. So throwback to the Stone Mountain days of high school recruiting for LSU. But he's I think he's a top 5-10 edge rusher. It doesn't really matter. I mean, he's ranked as a 5-star already. And he's someone the staff is very high on. Look, their one edge commit is a 5-star in Jaden Bryant. Well, he committed out of South Carolina as soon as Sterling Lucas got here. We just talked about him being the South Carolina defensive end edge coach, and Lane brought him in to fill that void left by Kyle Williams leaving the staff. Well, the very first offer KJ Green ever got was in 8th grade at South Carolina's camp when Sterling Lucas offered him. So he had been recruiting him forever to South Carolina. You just carry that relationship over to LSU now. He's not a South Carolina kid. Yes, he is over in that area, but he's open with his process. And Lucas has a great relationship with the kid, with his parents, with everyone around him, with the people at the high school. So it's almost one where you feel like, okay, we've been in this one all along, instead of, hey, this kid kind of popped up on LSU's board whenever you got here. And that's just kind of the benefit sometimes of a coaching change, where you bring in connections. Jamar Cain had a lot of them, right? Like when you come from another school in the SEC or an Oklahoma, like you're recruiting a lot of the same kids. And fortunately for LSU, they hired a DN's coach who was well known for pretty much big game hunting on 5-star defensive ends. And that's what the visitor list has looked like so far.
So keep in mind, okay, Sterling Lucas, fantastic job here. But remember, we talked with Shea. Actually, that was on Wednesday. That was just hours before Jaden Bryant's flip. So at the point Shea mentioned that, he was still talking about Bryant in the class. Well, later that day on Wednesday is when Bryant flipped. And then, but here's what I think is important to remember about Bryant. We talked about this. If you're an everydayer, you'll know this because we talked about it in the previous episode when Bryant flipped. But for those maybe who missed that, you look at, I can understand Jaden Bryant's situation, right? And maybe this commitment from KJ Green is further evidence of why Bryant flipped. So Bryant was the first commit under Lane Kiffin. Just 2 days after Kiffin was hired, Bryant from South Carolina commits. Okay. Then official visits open up. And last weekend, a 5-star edge in Abraham Cisse was on campus out of Pennsylvania. This weekend, the second weekend of official visits, a 5-star KJ Green is on campus. So if you're Jaden Bryant, you're going, wait a minute, like I'm a 5-star. I committed you 2 days after Lane Kiffin got here. And now the first 2 weekends of official visits, you got 5 stars at my position coming in this class as well. Meanwhile, he had an offer from Miami, which clearly is very good one. We know Miami's been super competitive. They just played for the national championship, but also competitive in the NIL era since NIL went live 5 years ago. So it stands to reason that Miami made a good competitive financial offer. And if you're Bryant, you're looking at the school you're committed to, keeps recruiting players at your position. I kind of get it. So he looks around, he goes somewhere else, but LSU had options. Obviously, if LSU didn't need or have other options, they would have stayed firmly committed to Jaden Bryant. He likely would have stayed firmly committed to LSU, but they started looking around, and clearly they landed here on KJ Green, who, as you heard Shay say there, has a great relationship with Sterling Lucas from the time he was in the 8th grade. So you know what you're getting in that prospect in KJ Green, and he's a guy that already is rated as a 5-star according to 24/7. And so you've replaced one elite edge rusher with another elite edge rusher. And I'll be curious to see if there's still more to add. I want to remind you, when you look at this position group, it's something that we've talked about often here, with Lane Kiffin talking about the importance of high school evaluation and character because of the fact that guys, you know what, let me just you've heard it before. I'm going to play it again. This was Lane Kiffin in spring when talking about how they evaluate high school guys they're recruiting.
I challenge our guys to make sure we evaluate who they are really, really well. Who is the player as they're coming out of high school? Because what is their mindset? How competitive are they? Because what's going to happen is most likely it's not going to go like they want in the first year. And then get into your analytics of, okay, well, if they're going to, or you're going to pay them, and then they're going to leave after year one, then what did you really get out of them from a business sense versus the money going somewhere else? So I really try to find that in tight ends, but in all of our players, okay, who really are they in nowadays setup that it is, so that they are competitive enough that this is the place they want to be at, and not come into a place for a check because then all of a sudden it doesn't go well, they'll get another check somewhere else. And are they going to stay through some adversity, which is what they need to play through too as a good player? So that obviously character was always part of the evaluation, but I've moved it a lot higher now because of the ability to leave, where before you got the 17-year-old, well, he was really stuck with you for 4 years. So he had to eventually buy Henry, which just was never going to play. Now they really don't have to. They just go somewhere else.
It's a soundbite I've played for you dozens of times on this show since Lane Kiffin said it, because it's a great window into the mindset that Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock have. They are not going to pay high school players that are going to come to LSU and not contribute year one. It's that simple. If you're a 3-star, if you're a prospect, you want to not make money on the front end, come sit, wait your turn, and then get paid when you blossom, great. But if you're an elite level prospect who's expecting money up front to be a part of the high school signing class, then you have got to be someone who can contribute right away. And they're showing you position groups and the edge rusher spot, the defensive line as a whole, like we talked about last year with Lamar Brown and Richard Anderson and Deuce Geralds, Trenton Henderson. Like, they think those guys can contribute immediately. They're willing to invest there. Where they're not going to invest in the high school ranks is a place where you're not going to contribute immediately. Namely, among them, look at quarterback, for example. Like, they didn't go get in the mix for Elijah Haven, which was going to cost money to get him here. They didn't get in the mix. Maybe it didn't even fit structurally, within the system. But even better example is Josh Dobson. 5-star number one corner, was thought to be a heavy LSU lean all throughout his recruitment. Now all of a sudden LSU's not even on the list. Why? Because in 2027, there's not going to be a spot for him to be on the field. So LSU's not going to pay him what it would take to get a 5-star to campus to have him sit for a year. Take those resources, put it somewhere else, like in your edge rusher group where you're going to rotate guys and all these guys can contribute.
The Pistons are sorting through offseason targets who can better fit around Cade Cunningham. Matt Griffin joins Ku Kahil with Locked On Pistons and explains the options.
Who would be your top 5? Who are some players that if the Pistons took a chance on, if they took a swing on, you'd be like, okay, I get it. So, Matt, I'm going to let you go first. We both have I have 13 guys. In case Matt names one of mine, I'll bump one down. Matt said I think he has 9. So, Matt, I'll let you go first. Take the first draft pick.
Yeah, this is tough. I do want to first address that. Ku is throwing me a hospital ball over the middle here. Bob Sanders is coming down in the hook zone, ready to take my head off. He told me yesterday, he was like, don't pick good players. You can't pick players that are good. You have to pick players that suck, or else you're not understanding the point of the conversation. He said, players with downside, players that things can go wrong. I said, like Kyrie Irving, like a 35-year-old coming off a torn ACL. Ku said, no, that doesn't count. He's too obvious. He's too good. So we're really scraping at the bottom of the barrel here. But my first pick, I am going to pick a good player. I think Kawhi Leonard is the one that feels like the biggest sort of risk reward that's being talked about. A guy that it makes sense for the Clippers to trade, and I think it makes sense for us to dabble in that. I mean, it's simple. It's obvious. He doesn't play a ton of games, right? He has the whole tree planting situation that I don't think really affects anything that's going on the basketball court. Uncle Dennis is around. There's a lot of negative things, or a lot of hoopla, I guess, that kind of surrounds Kawhi, as quiet of a player as he is. But he's one of the 7 or 8 best players in basketball. He solves a ton of problems that we have, and we know that it all translates to the playoffs. I can't think of very many teams who just have the caliber of physicality and strength on the perimeter to have a matchup for Cade and a matchup for Kawhi. Like, those two dudes are just such kind of bullies, and again, so strong that I don't know. That'd be such a matchup issue to me, those two together in particular. So Kawhi is the layup risk reward trade to me.
All right, Kawhi was on my list. I just crossed him off. I agree with everything you said. I think Kawhi definitely should be one of the players that they should be looking at. That if you want to take a chance on a guy, obviously, like you mentioned, the injury history. But if you want to take a chance on a guy, Kawhi is definitely at the top of the list, I feel like. So I completely understand that one. I think a lot of Pistons fans would understand it. I see a lot of Pistons fans, though, scared about doing it for obvious reasons. But that's the whole point of this. There is downside to whoever we're picking here. There has to be some downside, and that's why they're available. That's why the Pistons can get them. Who would you be willing to take the chance on? So Kawhi is someone I would agree with. I already told Matt my number one guy. That I was mentioning that kind of sparked this whole conversation because Lindsey Hunter brought it up on the squad show and kind of sparked this whole conversation. First guy I'm mentioning is Zach LaVine, and I want to start by saying this. I am aware of his on-off stats. I am aware that he hasn't been very impactful on a lot of the teams he's played on.
I'm going to remind you of him when you stop talking here.
What do you say?
I'm going to remind you when you stop talking here.
I will. Fair enough. According to Clean the Glass, the last time that Zach LaVine had a positive on-off was in Chicago, the 24-25 season before he got traded to Sacramento, according to Clean the Glass. But outside of that, it has been rough. With that said, one of the things that me and Matt were yelling at each other about in the Xbox parties the other day was a lot of people when the Golden State Warriors traded for Andrew Wiggins. There wasn't very many people I believe or I saw that thought that was a good trade for the Warriors and thought they were taking a step back, thought he was going to be terrible for them. No one liked Andrew Wiggins at the time. And he ended up turning it around because he had the tools, he had the skill sets, and ended up buying into playing the right way. And now he's become like this two-way guy that, who knows, Matt might have him on his list here. So I kind of look at the same way with LaVine because of this. The weaknesses with LaVine, obviously, is defensively, but if you really want to get nerdy, I watched someone break it down with the real nerdy stuff. And really, it's about the fact that he doesn't really contribute to the possession battle. I'm sure Matt will talk about this. He doesn't get many deflections. He doesn't contribute steals, offensive rebounds, stuff like that. And I get that. But that's why I think the Pistons are a unique situation to where you could get the best out of Zach LaVine. He actually would be impactful or helpful to this team. I do think the Pistons are one of the rare teams that can supplant or supplement some of those weaknesses. They are a great defensive team. He would have a great defensive foundation around him. They have guys all around him who contribute to winning the possession battle and kind of contribute to the weaknesses of what he brings. And what he brings strength-wise is exactly what I think the Pistons need, where I think it's one of those unique situations where it's like, okay, this guy is clearly talented. He's one of the best shooters in the entire NBA. He's not just, a good shooter. He's been one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA for years now. I mean, I looked at, according to Clearing the Glass, he's been in I just lost it. Where is it? He's been in the 95th percentile, 98th percentile, 77th percentile, 83rd percentile on three-point shots. A lot of those are self-created threes as well. He's also still a really good rim finisher, according to Clean the Glass. He's been the 78th, 84th, and 73rd percentile the last 3 years. So we know what he brings offensively. He is a scorer. He's a guy who can score off the dribble. He can still get to the basket. He does all those things, and that is what the Pistons are needing. And then his weaknesses, I'm very aware of his weaknesses, and I'm not ignoring them. I just think the Pistons are a unique team that can kind of, I don't know if hide is the right word, but kind of make up for his weaknesses while also reaping the benefits of what he does bring to the floor still. So that's why I would have him 1 on mine. The other thing you'll see as a constant throughout my list, I don't know if Matt looked at it the same way, a constant throughout my list, short-term deals. It's been made very clear to me that the Pistons, if they do take a swing on someone, they want it to be someone on a short-term deal. And Zach LaVine is on a 1-year contract. He might get bought out by the Kings, which makes it even, you might be able to sign him for, he hasn't been a great few years for him. You might be able to sign him for something cheap. So that's something I considered with all of the guys I brought up here. Zach LaVine's on a 1-year deal. I think he might get bought out. So there's the argument for why I would understand why if Trajan was like, you know what, low risk, 1-year deal, gets bought out. Okay, bring him in for a cheap deal. He might be able to help us. So that's number 1 on my list.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. I think that the synergy there that you talked about makes a ton of sense on its face. We do a great job of supplanting all the things that he's terrible at, obviously, and he brings our primary weakness, I would say, which is shot making, shot creation from that 2 spot. I think Zach LaVine isn't very good, is the problem. I think that, like you said, on a buyout, it being a 1-year deal, it does feel like it would certainly make sense as like a last ditch effort. If the clock is kind of winding down in the offseason, you haven't really done anything, you feel like you kind of got stuck or you didn't make any moves to make the team feel different heading into the season. I think throwing Zach LaVine into the mix in that scenario makes sense. But I would not, I don't think, consider him any bit of a target. You talked about, or you touched on his team always being better with him off the court. It's just one of those things where, like, when it's that big of a sample and it's year after year after year, that's no longer a bug, that is a feature. Like, that is just a very simple way of being like, this guy's not contributing to his team on the scoreboard, which is the thing that we all care about at the end of the day. And you talked about the possession battle. Like, I think that just saying he doesn't contribute to the possession battle is the kindest way of putting it. He is an active, massive negative to the possession battle. He will tank you in the possession battle. The Pistons were 1st or 2nd in the possession battle this season, right? That number could be low as 8th or 9th next season if Zach LaVine were in the starting lineup. I really think that. But I don't want to disregard the shot making. I think that that'll be a theme of what we look for here. We're looking for flawed players who help the Pistons in areas of need. I think Zach LaVine kind of fits the bill perfectly. I don't know. That wouldn't excite me, I'll say.
So we'll move on to our next guys here. The last thing I want to say on LaVine is this. I'm very aware of everything Matt brought up. I was once a strong LaVine defender. Now I'm more of just like I'm aware he's a talented offensive player, and the stuff he doesn't bring has actively hurt his teams, especially in Sacramento these last 2 years. People who defend Zach LaVine, I think, bring up something that I think is at least fair to bring up if you're going to take a chance on him. It's not like he's been on the greatest teams. I get what you're saying. A large sample size. It's been a large sample size of him being what you mentioned. Again, there's a level of belief with me that if they did take a chance on the Pistons have such a defensive foundation and such a foundation of players who contribute to the possession battle, I would like to see what he would look like in a situation like that. If they did not, like is different. I don't really care for what happens with LaVine moving forward, but if he were to end up in a situation like the Pistons, I think it would be interesting to test the equation here. I think it would be an interesting test study to see, okay, he's in a good situation here. There should be no reason why he shouldn't be able to contribute. If he doesn't, okay, really, I just think it would be an interesting testing situation here, but that's why I have him because there is very clear downside to potentially going after him. It's just a matter of, do you believe it would play out the right way for the Pistons because of his shot making and scoring and shooting.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Denzel Ward says he still wants to be in Cleveland even after the Myles Garrett trade. Spencer Herman with Locked On Browns lays out what it means.
Denzel Ward did say over the weekend at his celebrity softball game here in town that he wants to stay even after the Myles Garrett trade. I believe the exact quote he had was something along the lines of Myles is a great friend, was a great teammate. I appreciate him, but that he wants to remain here, that he sees the path forward, that it's always been about Cleveland and Cleveland against the world or Ohio against the world and all these different things. And obviously this is a place for him that he calls home. I would imagine that what softens the blow for a player like Denzel of losing a player like Myles, who he's played with since he's been here, because Myles came here 1 year before him in 17, and then he got here in 18, and they've kind of been the stalwarts of the defense since then, is the fact that Jared Verse comes over in the trade as well, and that you have this new teammate who can immediately fill that role. I'm not going to say fill Myles' shoes, but fill that role, and you feel like you can still, have some success on that side of the football in particular, but also as a team, because this isn't a tank job. And that's the key part of this. Like it's understandable why after Myles was traded last week, the natural conversation then becomes like, all right, what about Denzel? All right, what about Grant Delpit? Who I honestly think, I think they still see Delpit as somebody that could be part of their future plans just in general, because again, not quite as far along in his career as somebody like Denzel. He's only 27, so he's still got some notable years in his 20s and in his prime to go. Denzel's a little closer to 30, but still playing at a high level. And so I think for both those guys, there's reason to keep them around, at least in the short term, and let them be part of this defense as you continue to get this roster primed to compete again. And that could be as soon as next year if they find their quarterback solution. And so, like I said, I understand why it's a natural thing to then jump to those guys, and Denzel being sort of chief among them, as let's trade this guy next, or this guy should be traded next. But listen, as I said, the trade they made for Myles was proof that Cleveland and Andrew Berry aren't interested in just tearing this thing down to the studs, especially on that side of the ball. It's not some fire sale on the defense just because Myles is gone. Again, they got Jared Verse back for that reason. They didn't want this to become some tear down like it was in 16, 17, where you're not winning any games and you're non-competitive and you're just starting with all these draft picks and potential and hope and dreams. No, they got a player back that instantly slots into their defense as a starter, as an edge rusher, and keeps them competitive, at least on that side of the football, and likely is one of the top 10 defenses still in the game. Again, that's assuming everything goes smoothly with the transition of Mike Rutenberg and all those different things. So we'll see. But there's reasons to still keep Denzel around and keep this defense at a competitive level. And the other part of this too is just that you're not just going to sell Denzel to sell Denzel. I understand where everyone now just kind of jumps to that conclusion and says if you got that for Myles, let's see what you can get for Denzel and get more draft capital. And that's an easy thought to have, yes. But from an organization standpoint, I understand where they also are thinking about continuing to sort of bridge that gap between here's the thing about this rebuild. Andrew Berry has tried to thread the needle, and I honestly think after the trade last week, he's done a fairly good job of this on not completely tearing it down to the studs like they did in 16 and 17 to then rebuild it back up. They've tried to thread the needle on staying competitive while rebuilding. And you can argue that they maybe didn't do it great because they weren't really competitive the last 2 years. I get that. But from a defensive standpoint, they stayed really good. And he's tried not to lose that dominance while trying to sort of focus his resources on the offensive side of the ball to get that group back up to par, because that group is just set back so much by the Deshaun trade and missed picks here or there, and not having those first rounders, and an offensive line aging out, like all these different things that all kind of came to a head this offseason, it was time to revamp it. But they tried not to just tear it down to the studs and do it that way. And I think they've done a decent job, at least on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, they weren't competitive, but I think in the NFL, the only path forward isn't always just do the Sashi Brown, get all the draft picks possible and rebuild that way. I know that seems enticing and intriguing, but at the same time, as I talked about last week, like the reason getting Jared Verse is better than just getting more draft capital for Miles is that it's a player that you already know exists at the NFL level that's really, really good. It's not this idea of like, well, now they got to use that pick to replace Miles, or now they got to use that pick on XYZ player that maybe turns into something and they need to give time to develop. Like, no, this guy's already ready to play. And so that stuff matters. I think from that standpoint, Barry's done a pretty good job. I also think, Denzel is like I don't know that he's going to net as much as Miles, but I may be one of the only people that thinks like the draft capital they have is helpful to them to potentially move up and down the board if needed to find a quarterback or whatever that might look like. I like every first rounder you get in addition, every second rounder you get in addition only helps your cause if you're trying to move or if they end up needing to move, depending on how the season goes. So I'm not sitting here like thinking, well, they don't have enough capital or they can't do this, they can't do that. Like I'm willing to see this thing through first before we get to that point. And maybe Denzel does get moved at some point, but I just don't think you have to rush into it just because you traded Miles. It's maybe a conversation we're revisiting at the trade deadline, depending on how the team is. But again, you're not going to undersell Denzel either. The same way they wouldn't have undersold Myles Garrett. There's a reason that trade got done. The Rams threw in Jared Verse and got it pushed over the top, but it took that to get there before they just flatly said yes. And so you're not just going to sell Denzel for peanuts if you think he's worth some level of draft compensation or whatever. You're going to trade Denzel if somebody blows you away. So it's going to take somebody blowing them away to do that, and that might not come until maybe the trade deadline. I just don't think it's going to happen. And there doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency from the team right now to just like trade him because, again, it's not a fire sale. The other thing I'll say, too, is as much as Miles was the face of the team and the face of the franchise, Denzel is an easy player to still sell as somewhat of the face of the franchise. And I know he's maybe not as he's quiet. Miles was quiet in his own way too, but Miles, he would say some things. He certainly put on a show on Sundays, and you felt his impact at times more because with Denzel, it's like guys can just stay away from him. Guys don't have to throw his direction. Miles is in there every play almost on the defensive line where you see his impact. But Denzel, let's face it, like he's been really, really good. He still is one of the best corners in football by my estimation. And, he makes plays too. The end of the Steelers game last year that they won, throwing his direction like 2 or 3 straight times. It was like, what is Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers thinking? I don't know. He's one of the best corners in the game. And he's a Cleveland guy. And so that makes it a little bit easier. And so he's an easy pill to swallow when it comes to trying to sort of pivot to, well, who else can we sort of sell to the fan base? Denzel's that guy. And so I think right now it just makes sense for him to be here. That could change. Again, if somebody calls you up and gives you a Godfather offer, you take it. But right now I think it's fair that they want to sort of keep transitioning this defense into this next era with him as part of it. And if that means they don't trade him this year, fine. I think it probably becomes a bigger thing next offseason. And maybe at the trade deadline, depending on how the team is, it flares back up again. But I think it's fine, and it doesn't seem like anybody from either side wants to move on from Denzel Ward at this stage, despite the fact that Myles Garrett was traded. And I think that's a fair approach to the situation at this moment. All this said, 1 week later, it's officially time to move forward from this Myles Garrett trade.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. Brandon Ayuk is speaking out again as his future with the 49ers stays uncertain. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with Locked On 49ers get into it.
Brandon Ayuk, Croc. The belt coming, Croc. Stop running from the belt. You scared. They scared was his message, Brandon Ayuk's message for the San Francisco 49ers. What was your takeaway? And by the way, I'll read some of the transcript of it because it's not a video that we can play because this is a family program. But Brandon Ayuk took to social media after all the recent stuff going on with him, Croc, and there was a warrant out for his arrest because of the video that he put out there. He's going 100 miles an hour by Levi's Stadium. He put up a picture of him wearing a Washington Commanders hat. The only people he follows on his Instagram apparently are his wife and Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. So clearly, Brandon Ayuk wants to be able to go sign with the Washington Commanders. We don't know how the Washington Commanders feel about all of this, but now we know a little bit more about how Brandon Ayuk feels about some of this stuff. What was your initial takeaway? And then we'll get a little bit deeper into what he's saying about the San Francisco 49ers and where he's coming from.
Well, there was a couple of things I saw from this weekend from him that were, I don't even know what to call it, good signs. I don't know. He posted a weird picture on Instagram with like his shirt off. He had like his boxers showing, but people have been floating pictures around about him being out of shape.
Yeah.
He doesn't look out of shape, but he just looks like he hasn't been like really lifting weights. So that was the first sign. He's not this heavy set guy that people were kind of painting him out to be.
Yeah.
The other thing though, finally he's talking, and Brandon Ayuk, a guy that I don't quite understand exactly what's going on, but if we are decoding what he's saying, it just sounds like, hey, 49ers, let me go and I'll be on my way, and you guys do your thing, but you don't want to let me go because you didn't know how to really utilize me, right? Which I've actually said a lot on the show. And you guys don't want me to go somewhere else because I'm going to put BTA, as these kids say nowadays. So it's interesting, but I guess it was cool to hear him break his silence.
Okay.
It sounded like he's going to play football, and that was a big question mark.
That was a big one. He wants to go sign with the Washington Commanders. So he wants to play somewhere. He wants to have control of exactly where he plays. And clearly, obviously, the 49ers don't want him back, and he doesn't want to play for the San Francisco 49ers. We already knew that part. So let me do some more of this, the transcript here from Brandon Ayuk, and then we'll touch on some of the subjects. Quote from Brandon Ayuk on his Instagram today. Quote, "Man, stop running from the belt. The belt's coming. You scared, they scared. The truth is they scared. They know how I get. They're going to say, oh, yeah, BA did this. BA did that. BA did, that bleep, allegedly. But what they're not going to say is BA suck at football because they know how I get. And they're running from that belt that's on the way." Croc, do you think the 49ers are afraid of Brandon Ayuk playing for another football team in the NFL?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I will say, no, I don't think they're afraid of him going somewhere else. I wish I kind of could be a fly on the wall in the 49ers building to understand exactly why they've been postponing this whole thing. Now, I know there's some people that are going to say, well, they don't have to release him. He's under contract technically with the 49ers, but he's on this list where he hasn't reported. So he's not counting a roster spot right now. He's not counting against the salary cap. So, heck, just leave him out there. But even then, just the distraction. How long do you want that to be a part of this whole thing? So, I think the 49ers can let him go, and I don't think they'll lose out on any money. So, just let him go and let him be a distraction or a misfit somewhere else. That's if I'm the 49ers.
Yeah.
Why do you think that they're continuing to kind of prolong this situation?
They are not letting him go because they don't have to. That's the biggest thing. And they don't want to help him out. They feel
they don't have to. Do you think that this situation is somewhat of a distraction?
I think it's a distraction for fans and for media. I don't think it's a distraction for anybody inside the building. I don't think anybody cares. Include the coaches, the players. Clearly, if it was a distraction, they would do something about it, I think. And I do think, some people have argued maybe the 49ers side is being petty, right? And I get that. And in some ways they are. I agree with that. But why would they help Brandon Ayuk go play for another team in the NFL if that team's not willing to give them a draft pick for it, right? So the 49ers have contractual control of Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk didn't fulfill his obligations of that contract. So the 49ers are not going to help anybody have that player. And the 49ers don't want to set a precedent. And I bet secretly that at least 30 other teams, and who knows, maybe the Washington Commanders don't even sign Brandon Ayuk if he was released, right? But I bet secretly every other team in the NFL, GM, ownership, front office people, are glad the 49ers are doing what they're doing because they don't want a team to start setting the precedent of letting people go and be insubordinate and like, okay, here you go. You get to go do whatever you want now. And so the 49ers, it doesn't hurt them to hold on to Brandon Ayuk. In their mind, he didn't hold up his end of the bargain, and they're not going to help another team get him. And if that team wants to come get him, they can trade for him. And if they don't want to trade for him, then they'll do it at their own time, and that'll make it more difficult for that team to utilize Brandon Ayuk right away because he won't have his full training camp at that point, right?
What do you think about this, right? So how the 49er in the chat says, Ayuk has to just show up in the building and this could all be over. Crazy work.
Yeah.
I have thought about that. What happens if he just pops up like, hey, I'm here? Would they then have to take him off of that list?
Yeah, show up.
Do something about this situation. So would it be that simple?
Yeah, show up. That's if Brandon Ayuk wants to do something, he can do something, which is show up, and then it would force the 49ers' hands. And the other part of it is I heard somebody, I don't even remember what it was now. I saw it on Twitter. Someone said that the 49ers canceled the mandatory mini camp, so he couldn't show up. So they wouldn't have to release him. I don't think that's the case at all. This is, I think, something that
I
was
don't think that's the case.
World Cup and stuff. Yeah.
It's not the case because he could show up without having to go to mandatory minicamp.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it could be over if Brandon Ayuk wants it to be. It could have never begun. Right. So there's a lot of blame to go around. I do think that, and I get where Brandon Ayuk's coming from. He feels his certain way, and he has a right to feel the way he feels. But the way he's going about it, it just doesn't seem like he's got the right people on his side advising him, or didn't listen to those people who were advising him on his side. And the stuff he's saying is like, he's accusing the 49ers of being childish and being a kid that takes the ball and goes home because they didn't get picked to play on the court. There's nobody being more immature about any of this than Brandon Ayuk. Like, if anybody's being childish, it's Brandon Ayuk. So I think a strong glance in the mirror would be something that would help Brandon Ayuk out quite a bit. Maybe a call from an agent to the 49ers, maybe him showing up. But yeah,
does he have an agent right now?
I don't. From what I understand, he does not, and that's kind of part of this. It's like who's backing Brandon Ayuk right now, and that's part of it for me. It's like, if you were another team, the Adam Peters connection is interesting because Peters drafted him with the 49ers. And so there's some connection for Adam Peters with Brandon Ayuk. But aside from that, would you, if you were a GM, be like, would you want to bring in Brandon Ayuk after seeing what's gone down over the course of the last couple of years? I don't think it's a slam dunk that a team's just ready to bring him in. And you can be buddies all you want with the quarterback, but the quarterback doesn't sign the checks, and the quarterback doesn't get to say who gets signed. And so I think there's a chance that Brandon Ayuk doesn't even get to play with the Commanders either.
I would be intrigued because he wouldn't, like you said, they know how I get on the field, right? Or however he worded that.
Yeah.
He does play football very well.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to have to sit down, okay, what went wrong? And how did it get to this point? I would bring him in. Now, am I bringing him in to sign him or just get to know, right? Like, you can go on visits. You can have guys come in and, hey, let's sit down and have a talk. What happened? What is the issue? What went wrong? Maybe you get to learn a little bit more about him. I've coached a lot of different kids, and each kid is a little bit different. And you learn kids and how they respond or react to things. And there's some programs you go to where it's just, this is how we do it. That's it. If you don't like it, kick rocks. There are others that understand each individual kid for the most part, right? and know, okay, I don't coach this guy the same way I coach this guy. So what went wrong with the 49ers, and were they coaching him or pushing him a certain way where he didn't really respond well to it? Now, again, I don't know. I'm just saying I would sit down to try to find out those things and see how that either, am I able to coach him or am I not? And if you're not, then just, okay, well, let him walk out your building without signing him. But I would have to figure that out if he were released. If he's not released, I would probably do like the other teams are doing and just sit down and say, hey, 49ers got to let him go at some point, unless he just continues to not show up.
The saga is not over, and now we've heard some from Brandon Ayuk. It didn't help. You know what Brandon Ayuk needs to do? He needs to go on a podcast and talk normal with somebody that can ask him some questions, right? I think that would help as far as the public goes. Maybe he doesn't care what the public thinks, right? But
but I don't think it
like
super
it sounds.
well.
The stuff he's saying just sounds dumb, to be honest with you. It's like, what are you saying, dude?
I don't think it went super well last time when he went on the pivot. Remember, they had to kind of, hey, you wanted to come on the show, like,
that's right.
So like, talk to us a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
So I don't know how well he does trying to articulate what exactly it is that he wants.
Communication is key, Kruk, right? As a coach, communication. If there's no communication, the communication does go both ways. So I think that's the biggest thing. The biggest lesson here. Communicate, folks.
Welcome back to the Big 6 in 60. The Giannis Antetokounmpo rumors are getting louder, and Miami keeps showing up as a team to watch. Wes Goldberg and David Rammel with Locked On Heat break down the buzz.
People around the league believe that the Heat are closing in on a deal for Giannis. We have the clip. We could play it here.
Well, here's what I will tell you. Much to my alarm, I will say that this is not reported from a Miami side or a Milwaukee side. This is around the league. People around the league are like, yeah, it sounds like Miami's close on Giannis.
It would not surprise. So we got that. We also, since we last recorded, David, got pictures of Giannis in Miami. And those started making the rounds on social media. The Associated Press's Tim Reynolds, who does a great job reporting on the NBA, checked in with Giannis's people. He said that he was in Miami for something at least related to the World Cup, tweeting, Giannis spent a few days in South Florida this week for off-court business, including events related to the FIFA World Cup. A person familiar with his plans tells us. So there's a lot of stuff to get to here, David, and we haven't even gotten to all of it, which we're going to get to as much of it as possible on today's show. But what did you think, at least when you saw these photos going around?
It was interesting. I can't remember what player it was a couple of years ago. It was Kawhi Leonard. Didn't somebody like post a picture of Kawhi Leonard at a Chipotle in Miami Beach or something like that? Maybe that was just making the Twitter rounds. Like I don't even know, like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, I remember it was circulating around Miami Twitter, if you will, and people made a big deal about it. And I think, look, I have no reason to doubt Tim's reporting. He contacted somebody, Giannis's camp, and they're like, yeah, he's here for FIFA. He's here for the World Cup. Obviously, South Florida with a big international community, the world's biggest event, obviously gets a lot of attention. And I think with Giannis already here in South Florida, it makes a lot of sense because he is an international superstar as well. He does like soccer. I think we saw a video of him on the pitch somewhere, kind of doing something. He hasn't played since he was 11 or something to that effect. And, just running around on the field, on the pitch. So, I think it's interesting to see that he's there. I wouldn't read too much into it. Now, is he communicating with anybody here? Is he here with family? Are they looking at homes? Like, I think these things could happen. Like, if you're potentially moving to an area, as you assume that he might, then you would probably take a look around and just get a sense for it. And I'll say, look, unfortunately, Miami did not have its best week weather-wise. Kind of cloudy, kind of rainy, kind of hot and humid. Then again, it is June, so you figure that's going to happen anyway. But maybe he's used to it. Maybe it's a lot better than whatever they've got going on in Milwaukee, especially during the winter. So maybe that's not such a bad thing. But yeah, I think that it makes sense for Giannis to be here because of something completely different, when also just claiming that he's not here for necessarily the trade or anything like that. But while he's here, why not take a look around? Why not enjoy some of what Miami has to offer, and certainly maybe even get a head start on looking into potential places to live and things of that sort. So yeah, I mean, is it nothing? Probably. Is it something? Also probably. I wouldn't doubt that he's looking around and saying, you know what, this isn't such a bad place.
He was hanging out at the mall, right?
What mall was that?
Bell Harbor shops.
There you go.
There you see him at the airport, which is, you know,
So
how
not
you get
with
to
family,
Miami
though.
typically. Not with family, which sounds like he's probably doing business. Not with family in those photos. There's that. You also mentioned the Kawhi thing. I did look it up. There he is. There's Kawhi behind this guy taking a selfie of apparently an Aventura, the Aventura Chipotle. So good for Kawhi, I guess. But to your point, that meant nothing, right? Kawhi never played for the Miami Heat. So no, but I do think that there's. So in a prior life, before I was full-time doing this, I had a different job in the alcohol industry, and my company at the time, when I was living in Northern California, paid for me to go to Los Angeles for business, right? Like I took a paid, like we had work in business, we had business in Los Angeles. So hour and a half flight, took Southwest from Oakland to LAX, and ended up just taking another couple of days while I was down there, because it happened to also be the Warriors playing the Clippers in the playoffs. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's first year when he was with the Clippers. I was like, all right, I'll just take a couple more days at the end of my business trip, and I'll go cover these Warriors Clippers games. And so, yeah, I had business to attend to, but then I also had my own business to attend to.
Sure.
And I just wonder if Giannis is doing something similar, where whatever dealer, Kelce or Nike or whatever off-court business is involved in the World Cup right now, maybe he's in Miami for that, and maybe while he's here conveniently, there's also an opportunity to just maybe perhaps do something else, right? Like you said, maybe get a little bit of a lay of the land, so to speak. So, look, going back to that Matt Moore, what Matt said on our show during that live stream, that people around the league believe that the Heat are closing in on Giannis. Look, I saw these photos of Giannis in Miami. I'm a cynic by nature. I don't think that Giannis is going to just be out after all of that. For Giannis to just be gallivanting about Miami, openly searching for homes, I find that hard to believe, right? After all of the I'll never leave Milwaukee stuff. And then, you know, talking to Matt and checking in with some other people, I don't think that this has anything to do with it, but it's a nice convenience, I think, is maybe the most we could say here. But I'll also say this. What else are Giannis's people going to say, right? Events related to the FIFA World Cup sounds a lot like Donald Trump not going to his son's wedding for, what was it? Circumstances related to government or something like that.
I don't know. I try not to follow up too much on what he's up to. So as far, I'm much more concerned about Giannis's.
I have been tracking Giannis a lot more than Trump's wedding plans.
That being said, I think, look, if a trade is consummated, and I think tying it together with what Matt and others are hearing, like there's a significant amount of buzz and a lot of people linking Miami, because we know for a fact Miami is involved and heavily interested. And we're also hearing the possibility that, look, there just isn't a better offer out there, and probably won't be. And they're probably trying to get as much as they possibly can out of Miami, because nobody else is even offering to anything to the same degree as what the Heat are offering. And so if Miami is probably the top team in terms of their opportunities to acquire Giannis. We talked about this recently. Maybe the Orlando Magic increased something. Maybe the Golden State Warriors had something. We're not sure. There could always be a dark horse team. And we've seen enough. We saw what happened with the Dame Lillard trade, et cetera.
But I do think it's fair to say that the Heat at this stage are the team that most people believe are most likely to trade for Giannis at this point.
Yes.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just kind of feels like everybody's looking at Miami being like, that's the team that desperately wants him, that has enough stuff to go get him. Maybe the offer's not amazing, but it might just be the best offer that Milwaukee's getting. And as I've said it before, like, I think it's a little surprising, the lack of offers that Milwaukee is getting. And it just speaks to a lot of, you know, less about where Giannis is in his career and kind of more about like where the league is and how many teams can actually afford to go get this guy.
That's all for today's Big 6 in 60. If you follow basketball, football, or college sports, the Big 3 in 30 has a half hour on the biggest news in the NFL, the NBA, and on campus, going up every weekday just like this one. Just search the Big 3 in 30 NBA, the Big 3 in 30 NFL, or the Big 3 in 30 college, wherever you're listening or watching now. Thanks again for tuning in to the Big 6 in 60.